Hello, I am Professor Sudhir Bisht and I teach business marketing or B2B marketing to my students of MBA who study at Delhi Technical Campus or DTC in Noida. Today we will discuss what are the major influences on business buyer. Just like there are many influences on the consumer buyers, there are various motivations which make you and I, who are consumers of, let us say, food grains or chocolates, or who buy clothing for ourselves, there are major influences on us. Similarly, there are some major influences on the business buyers. By business buyers, I mean when we sell to those people who either use that product as a raw material or who use it for processing something or selling it to somebody who do not consume it on their own. So that is what a business buyer is. So what are these major influences we will study today? And apart from that, I will also try to cover what are the major purchasing orientations of the company. When I say orientation, I mean what is the mental makeup of a company? What are the thought processes which are behind the selection of a seller? Who are the people? What is their mindset when it comes to making final purchases from organizational sellers? We will also briefly touch upon institutional and government markets. Institutional government markets and how they are different. What is the uniqueness about it? And we will have some uh, sneak peek into the customer's total cost of ownership. I hope you will find this lecture interesting. So the first major influence on a business buyer is environmental factors. What are environmental factors? Environmental factors are those factors on which business marketers can do little to stimulate total demand. Environmental factors are external factors, and they make it actually they make it harder. If the environmental factors are tough, they make it harder for a company or an organization to gain market share or to increase the market. Then there are certain organizational factors. For example, every organization has specific purchasing objectives or policies or procedures. So organizational factors also play a part. In organizational factor, we will also see how systematic a company is, how well structured its uh, purchasing department is, and how is the relationship between the purchasing department and the user department, how professionally managed the companies. These things we consider. Then there are interpersonal factors. The buying center, which I explained in the last lecture, in which I said there are initiators, there are users, there are people who are approvers, there are decision makers, there are gatekeepers. So they all have their own interest, their authority, needs, their status, their sense of empathy. So they also play a major part. And then there are individual factors. A buyer who's young, he may have different perception about something. The educational qualification of the buyer, all these things will play a role in influencing the final decision of selecting the buyer or making the purchase decisions. So, what are some of the environmental factors? The first is the level of the demand. As I said, mostly the B2B products and especially industrial products and in business marketing, lot of demand is derived demand. So this is an environmental factor on which a seller can do very little. For example, if one is manufacturing tires for cars, and if the car industry is going through a turbulent period, the production is down, new cars are not being sold, and and if it is supplying, if a particular buyer is supplying, let us say, to 2 3 factories, and those 2 3 factories are not doing well, so there is very little that the tire manufacturers can do with these buyers. Of course, these are with these buyers. He has to look for a market elsewhere. Also, economic outlook. If the economy is generally down, if the economic outlook is bad, then it's very difficult for business marketing organizations to thrive. If the Of course, some organizations thrive even in downturn. Some organizations are not able to take advantage of even the upturn in the economy. That is also a fact. It is also correct. But by and large, economic outlook also is a huge factor when it comes to taking a decision. I am talking of, it's a huge factor on the business buyer. Okay. Then interest rates. If you see, when the if in a country interest rates are, let us say, double digit, or they're 19-20% interest rates, around around 15 years ago, interest rates in India were also 18-19%. So when the interest rates are very high, then either the buyers they will go for a long credit period, or they will like to keep minimal inventory. And because an interest rate in a country, if it is 18%, 19% per annum, it becomes a major component of the cost. So interest rate plays a huge role. It plays a huge role. And especially when a company is importing something, and it needs to pay in foreign exchange. So it needs to buy, let us say I am purchasing a some software, or not software, some hardware from Taiwan, and I need to pay the Taiwanese company in dollars. So not only interest rate, the cost of dollar, if it goes up or down, it has a major bearing. Suppose I have today, my Taiwanese supplier has supplied me something which is worth X dollar, and it has given me a credit period of 1 year. And after 1 year, if the dollar rate goes from 70 rupee to 75 rupee, so that means I'll have to pay that much more to buy those dollars and return it to and send it to the Taiwanese seller. So interest rate also plays in the mind of a business buyer. Another factor which is very important is the rate of technological changes. This is especially true. This is especially true when the technology changes in a particular segment are going up. They are going up. I remember when Delhi Transport Corporation (DTC), it used to buy buses from Ashok Leyland and Tata Motors Telco. But during the period when all the buses had to shift to green fuel (CNG), at that time there was a period of 1.5 year when the corporation did not buy new buses, because it was waiting for the technology to change, and for the buses of newer model which would run on CNG gas to be made available. Policy and regulatory also plays a on the mind of a business buyer, Then competitive developments. What are the developments which are happening in the overall industry? That also plays a role on the mind of business buyer. Because if you are a seller, and if your technology is, let us say, the latest technology, and you are competing with somebody, with another seller whose technology is slightly dated, it will not result in immediate success for you. Because the buyer, he would some buyers are more progressive. They are risk takers. They immediately embrace anything which is new with the newer technology. But others are not. Others are risk averse. They may not embrace that new technology so soon. Social responsibility concerns also impacts the decision making of a business buyer. Social responsibility concerns. I remember that Mr. Rahul Bajaj, who passed away last week, he would give a lot of support to the ancillary industries in his company Bajaj Auto, and he had an option to import a lot of components, but he had this sense of urgency which made him give more encouragement to the Indian automobile ancillary factories. So this was his sense of social responsibility towards his country. So these are some of the environmental factors which play a role in shaping the decision of the business buyer. Of course, then there are organizational factors. Organizational factors, the objective of the organization. By objective of the organization, what we mean is, suppose there is an organization whose objective is to procure things locally, or to source from some particular sellers who follow ESG parameters, environmental, social, and governance parameters. Many companies in Europe, many companies in Europe insist that they will only source from those factories in India any textile product if that factory in India uh, it complies to the ESG norms. This is the policy of many companies in Europe. So it's embedded in their organizational culture. This is their policy. Okay. So sometimes procedures also have a major influence on the business buyer. If uh, if there is a buying organization which insists that the supplier or the seller must have ISO certification, suppose that is the procedure, it's a laid down policy, then it is imperative that the seller must have that ISO certification, otherwise the buyer will not buy from them. Okay. Another influence which can be called an organizational influence is organizational structure. Okay. There are delegation of authority guides. Managers can have a certain limit for purchase and procurement. Senior management may have higher limits. Top management will have some other limits. Then there could be some decisions which may go to the managing director or the director of finance or even to the board. So depending upon organizational structure, who can make a buy and who cannot make a buy, that is something which is very important. In some organizations, for example, there is a policy that anything which any capital item is an item which goes into your balance sheet over the time as depreciation. It is not a consumable. For example, you buy a laptop, it's a capital item, or you buy a generating set, or you buy a car. These are all capital items. In some organizations, you cannot buy a capital item even if it is less than $400-500, because a capital item must be budgeted and it must be approved for. Okay. So these are some of the organizational factors and organizational structures. uh, there are companies which insist on registration of vendors, and some companies may not insist on registration, especially if it is not a capital item, if it is just a expense, if it is just a item of daily expense. But there are companies which will insist on you on a seller getting properly registered, even if it is a small item which the organization needs to buy. It will only buy from registered vendor who is registered and who is given a particular code by that company, nothing will move. So you will ask me a question, so what happens if that company, suppose, wants to buy something which is of 500 rupees? So for that, it has some dedicated contractors who are registered and who are given this job of going to the open market, buying it and supplying. So these are some of the organizational factors. Okay, then there are some interpersonal factors. Interpersonal factors. Some people uh, may want to have a particular kind of a equipment or a particular kind of a machinery, but they may not have authority to buy it, and they may not be in a position to influence their bosses or to persuade and motivate their bosses to buy it. These are interpersonal factors. Okay, we see that there are certain departments in company where the departmental heads have more authority compared to the other departmental heads. It Interpersonal factor, it also depends upon the status of the business buyer. If the managing director of a company is in need of something and he feels that this is something which needs to be procured, then everything else gets a go by. Okay, it also in interpersonal factors, it is also a matter of interest. I recall an instance where in a factory, the factory production team wanted to install a small lift or a small elevator in the factory, but and it this factory was it used to deal in making electronic components, but the finance person, he pointed out that the cost of the lift will not be recovered in 7 to 8 years, and he said there will be no apparent advantage in having a lift rather than the workers themselves carrying parcels from ground floor to first floor. And he said the parcels were very light, and he saw no discernible value addition. So it is a matter of interest, persuasiveness. It also depends upon the if the seller is persuasive and if the buyer has empathy, it's the best combination. If the seller is persuasive, courteous, charming, and if the buyer has empathy and they need the product, then decision making is very fast. The fourth category of influence is individual factors: age, income, job, education. Okay, uh, if if in a small if in a small organization there is a need, which is felt by the sales team, that all the sales staff needs to be given, let us say, something like an iPad or a tablet. And if the decision maker is a man in his 30s, or so let us say the owner of the business or the number two in the business, if it is a family run business, he's in 30s, and he's a well read educated man. He's all the time on his own iPad, so he knows the how much more efficient working can become if such gadgets are given to the sales team. So he may be favorably disposed towards procurement of iPads or tablet. Also, it is in individual factor. It is the position of a person, the personality of a person. Some There may be some people who may be futuristic, so they may think. Let us take the case of investing in an ERP system. ERP, as you know, is enterprise resource planning. So a small organization may not need to invest immediately in a ERP system, but if there is a person who thinks that unless the company invest in these system, the company will not grow to the next level. Okay, or if it is also the attitude of a person. You will find many businesses who are running on pirated softwares, whether it is MS Office or it is Windows. And even well-to-do medium scale organizations don't have any qualms about using a pirated software, but small companies with people who have got very high ethical standards, they don't like to, they would not like to steal a software or use a pirated software. So these are some of the major influences on the business buyer, and they play a very important role. As a seller we can do very little about environment, except that we can make uh, as much use as possible of favorable environment, and in case the environment is not so favorable, we can cut down our losses. Okay. Then when it comes to another environment factor, what can we do about interest rates? The bank interest rates are very high, but certainly if you are a progressive thinker, you can think about raising more equity for your organization, so that you don't have to depend upon high interest rates. Okay. As a seller, if the interest rates are high, and if you are aware about the interest rate, you can have a discussion with the buyer who wants a long credit period. You can explain to him that long credit period at zero interest cost does not it's not a win-win situation to both of you. Rather, you can also tailor make a plan where paying cash or paying upfront, when I say cash I mean upfront, or paying without any credit. So you give a good good cash discount. I know many companies who offer a cash discount or a CD of 3%. Now a now for a buyer, a cash discount of 3% is a very attractive discount. Although what the seller has done, he has made this 3% discount. He has made this 3% discount by incorporating that cost in his overall pricing structure. But still, it looks attractive. So, as a seller, if you know of the environmental factors, if you know that uh, the buyer in Europe will insist upon a company giving an undertaking that it follows uh, all the rules in terms of not employing adolescents, boys and girls in the business. So you can be alive to that problem. When it comes to organizational factor, as a buyer, if you know the organizational factor which govern the business buyer, you can have a meeting strategy around it. If you know the procedure, and of the company, if the procedure of the company is you must have a ISO 9000 certification, then you have to go for it. You can proactively speak to your management. I'm talking of the buyer, the seller organization. You must have that accreditation if you want to deal with somebody who wants to deal with a company, only with a company which has an ISO certification. So similarly, in interpersonal factors, if you feel that the buyer or the buying team always likes to uh, negotiate from a pedestal of authority, you can have an appropriate strategy to give them an offer which satisfies their ego, but at the same time ensures that in the negotiation, in the deal, you are able to win the deal and you are able to make profits. Similarly, if you know that the when it comes to individual factors, let us take the case of personality. Suppose you are selling engine oil to a transportation company, and there are two types of engine oil. Traditionally, you have been selling them a engine oil to that company where the drain period, when you need to drain the oil from the sump and replace it with a new oil, if it is 5,000 kilometers. But now you have a product in which the drain period is just double. So instead of draining that oil at 5,000 kilometers, you can go on without draining that oil at 10,000 kilometers, and the price of the oil is not double, it is only 30% higher. So you know who is the buyer who will be interested in spending 30% more but saving 50% more. So spending 30% more and saving 50% more, the trade-off is very simple. If the business buyer is such who has this progressive attitude, who has this bent of mind which is scientific, and uh, who is able to take risk in terms of going for a higher product category, well, why not? So this is how your understanding of the major influences on the business buyer helps you to sell better. I hope you have been able to understand this well. Let me now try and explain to you what are the various orientations of people who buy. Okay, let's call it a company's purchasing orientation. What is meant by orientation? Orientation means which side are you leaning? Okay, are you goal oriented or you are path oriented? You're focused more towards goal, or you are more focused towards the means that you adopt for that goal. So this is orientation. You're left oriented, right oriented. Some economists say they believe in socialist orientation. Some believe in capitalistic orientation. So purchasing people, people who make purchases, the buying people, they also have some kind of a orientation. But before I come to what is meant by companies purchasing orientation, let us understand your buyers. I'm a seller, your buyer. Buyers, they buy goods and services. Why? Industrial buyers or organizational buyers, because they want to buy what you sell in processing something, or what you are selling to them. They are, suppose you are selling, you are supplying so you are supplying home cooked food to a factory which has 100 workers. So the home cooked food that you are supplying to a factory, the factory owner is providing meal to his workers. Why is he doing so? One, he wants his workers to be well fed so that his workers are healthy. He thinks it is his responsibility to ensure that the workers get meal on time, and a good meal, nutritious meal. And perhaps if the meal is value for money, nothing like it, isn't it? But the main purpose of your buyer who's operating in a particular business area, his main aim is to be profitable. I'm not saying profiteering, profitable. He wants to make money for his stakeholders. In the process, he's also meeting or satisfying the demand of his clients. He is also satisfying the needs of his customers. But he is doing a transaction with his customers only if the transactions are sustainable, long lasting, it adds value to both sides, to his customers and to him. So your buyer is in the business of making profitable transactions. How can he make profitable transaction? Number one, his selling price is higher, and it keeps on growing, or his costs keeps on diminishing. I'm trying to give a simplistic example. So the business buyer, they buy your goods or services to make money or to reduce operating cost to satisfy a social and a legal obligation, isn't it? Business buyers, they try to obtain highest benefit package in relation to a market offering cost. So uh, if if you are supplying if you are supplying a raw material to a factory or to an organization, then the procurement guy always wants that he is getting the best deal. He is getting the best deal. But if in the process of getting the best deal, is he hurting the seller? That is a question. This is where empathy comes in. Sometimes, and everybody is in the business to make money or to make legitimate profit so that he can survive and thrive. Yet, in the monopolistic situation, one party tends to exploit the other party, isn't it? So there are three types of companies purchasing orientation. One is called buying. Buying. In buying, the transactions are discrete. The relationship between the buyer and seller are arm's length. They are even adversarial in nature, adverse, as if the buyer and the seller, they are not going through a transaction as partners but as adversaries. The buyer focus sometimes is short term and it is tactical. When I say tactical, means short term. It is not strategic. It is not strategic. The buyer assumes that the value pie, the value chain. Value chain, as distinct from supply chain, value chain is comprises series of activities, primary activities and secondary activities, which together work in close harmony, so that input, when it goes out of the value chain and becomes output, it is able to give a profit to the company. That is a value chain. So the buyers, such buyers assume that the value pie is fixed, and if they will not negotiate with you and sometimes exploit you, till then they are not doing a good job. So they bargain hard to maximize benefits. They use two tactics. One is commoditization. Commoditization means they will try to treat your brand as a commodity. So if you say, I am from Castrol, I am selling high quality industrial lubricants. Oh no, if you are Castrol, there is Bharat Petroleum, there is Hindustan Petroleum, there used to be a company called Penjoil, there is Vidol, there is Tide Water, there is Indian Oil Corporation. What are you talking? You are selling an oil which has certain parameters. Other companies also have the same parameters. So you are not selling me Castrol, you are selling me a commodity called lubricants. This is the mindset of the purchaser or the buyer. Commoditization. He will say, no, I don't care a damn about your brand that you go through so much QC. Everybody has got a certification. Every company say, I am following these standards. All are big companies. So what are you even selling me? Oh, you say you are selling me services. Oh, the others are also selling me services. Such buyers also do multi-sourcing. They will not just depend upon one buyer, one seller. They will buy it from multiple sources, keep everybody on tenterhooks. So this has been called as buying orientation. Once again, transactions are discrete, relations at arm's length. Relationship is kind of an adversarial relationship. The buyer focus is short term. This is called buying orientation. Just above the buying orientation is procurement orientation. You can give them any word. You can say orientation with least empathy, average empathy and most empathy, or you can call them buying orientation, procurement orientation, or supply management orientation. So the authors I have studied, they have called it buying orientation, which is at the level I just explained, then procurement orientation and supply management. So midway is procurement orientation. The buyer does not treat you as an adversary. He's seeking quality improvements and cost benefits. That is his target. But he is not going with all guns blazing after cost benefits. He understands, he gives you a patient hearing. He is not trying to turn your brand into a commodity, nor is he multi-sourcing. He may be multi-sourcing, but he is sourcing from few. He is sourcing from few. More collaborative, less number of suppliers. Not multi-sourcing, but less number of suppliers. And they work such buyers, they work in close cooperation with the vendors also, with their own customers also. So their goal is to establish a win-win relationship. So they are better, one step better than buying orientation, procurement orientation. Instead of multi-sourcing, there are more than small number of suppliers. They are not trying to commoditize you. They are trying to seek quality improvement and cost benefit. Normally, you will find as a company becomes more progressive, they become better in dealing or in their relationship with their suppliers, with their vendors. The third purchasing orientation is called supply management, in which in which the buyer thinks that purchasing is a strategic activity. It adds strategic value to the value chain. Their focus is on improving the value chain. And improving the value chain means improving primary activities, secondary activities of business, not just procurement. And the focus is the end customer. So your customer is a factory, factory is end customer. Such buyers are, they know how to reduce cost. They believe in just-in-time inventory. They will not overstock. They behave as lean enterprises operating under demand pull rather than, you know, supply push. By this, what I mean to say is that they will keep their stocks in harmony with the way the stocks move out of their godown into the final customer or the final consumers godown. Okay, they are not interested in holding raw material at a lower price. Rather, they will go for long-term contracts with the supplier. Companies like Hero Motorcorp is an excellent example, or Bajaj Auto, or Maruti Suzuki, Honda. And I have closely watched companies like Kirloskar, Wärtsilä, very good companies. Really, ExxonMobil, really believe in supply management and really believing that the person who or the organization which is supplying them products or services is an extension of the company. It's like a partner, true partner of the company. So these are three company orientations: buying, procurement, and supply management. Let's now turn our attention to institutional and government markets. Well, a government market, as it is clear, is a government market is a market where the main buyer is the federal or the union government or the state government or the local government. By union government, I mean the government of India, for example, for India. Or state government could be the state government of Uttar Pradesh or National Capital Territory, and local government could be a municipal body, let us say South Delhi Municipal Corporation or North Delhi Municipal Corporation or Noida Authority. Or it could also mean government organizations like public sector organizations like Fertilizer Corporation of India, NTPC, which is National Thermal Power Corporation, or Coal India Limited. So government market. So this is government market where the buyer where the buyer is either the government directly or the government institutions, okay, and they purchase goods or services from private businesses. Sometimes they may also include government funded institutions, or they may not be commercial organizations. For example, if let us say Ministry of Health, it wants to procure vaccines from vaccine manufacturers and distribute them to various state governments, okay. So it's a very unusual characteristic in government market, because these government funded institutions, they make purchases which will help them perform the direct function of government. Once again, so they will make purchases, these government funded institutions, they will make purchases which will help them perform direct functions of the government. Similarly, in government market, I would also like to include institutional market. It comprises organizations that provide care to people or contribute to society, schools, hospitals, or nursing homes, or community centers, parks, sports complexes, government run sports complexes, prisons. These institutions are run on, by the government is sponsoring them, or they are running on donations from sponsors and on some funds. Okay, for example, Cancer Society of India, which is it is not a commercial organization. It is to provide succor and relief to the people who are suffering from cancer. Or Leprosy Mission of India. Leprosy Mission of India has done a remarkable work in the field of trying to eradicate leprosy from India and looking after leprosy patients. So, institutional markets and government markets. What are they have some these government markets? They have some characteristics. Their procurement process is quite, it is a specific procurement process, because profit I want to make a small distinction. Suppose government is buying, for example, government is buying vaccines from Serum Institute of India and from Bharat Biotech, and it is distributing. So what is the governments has also funded these institutes, these two private companies. Government has also encouraged them, because they are supplying vaccination to the nation, and the government is giving it free of cost to the citizens of India. So you need speedy procurement, so they will not follow any express approvals will be given. Express approval will be given, but otherwise there are specific procurement processes. There will be there could be some areas of procurement where there is a rate contract. The government has already fixed rates. Okay, ministries can buy uh, some category of product from these vendors at these prices. Rate contracts are there. Okay, so but now government has also started a portal, GEMS portal, in which small scale industries, MSMEs can register themselves and they can bid for the government orders. Okay. In government markets, in government supply process, contract monitoring is very strict. For example, NHAI has given a contract to, let us say, a company from Japan, or a company from Hyundai company, Hyundai company, to build a road, 80-kilometer stretch. Monitoring is very strict, because public exchequer's money is involved, and government will come under heavy criticism, sharp criticism, if it falters. So monitoring is very strict in case of government markets. Entry also is difficult. For example, if you want to participate in supply of something to defense, you need to go through a very long process. Many organizations need to test your product, and they will thoroughly examine you before they will give you a go ahead. And once you have passed, you have fulfilled the criteria and they have impaneled you, then you can bid every time, and then there is a pricing bid. Mostly there will be preference to certain sellers who are tried and tested, because suppose government is rolling out optical fiber network and it has an ambition to roll it out in every village. So they will give this contract only to 2 to 3 turnkey contractors who are tried and tested. They can't give it to everyone. And a bulk level decision will be taken. Let us take the case of a service provider which has withstood the test of time, and reliable service provider, TCS. If you go to a passport office or passport seva kendra, you will find most of the desks which are manned, they are not manned by people who are employees of the government or government servants from Ministry of External Affairs. No, most of them, except for 2 or 3 desks, most of the other employees are Tata Consultancy Services contracted employees. And typically TCS, since TCS has started manning, they're not manning it completely because there is still 2 or 3 key officers who are there. Things have really become very efficient. So, or a software provider for a government run bank, let us say Punjab National Bank, a person who provides the banking software to them. So no amount of lobbying will work if that supplier is working very well, if that service provider is meeting all the requirements. Very difficult to dislodge that supplier, but he has to work very well. In case of government markets, things are open to public scrutiny. Somebody can do a right to information, can do a RTI, and ask the government who are the vendors to BSNL, new vendors registered by BSNL in the last 1 year, and the BSNL will have to give answer to that. Another point is that in case of institutional and government markets, the role of marketing is very minor. Main role is how good as a company you are in delivering, what is your infrastructure, do you have a think tank, what are the kind of people who are working for you. Believe me, anytime government enters into a contract, it does what is called a due diligence of a vendor. It is not simple. Very easy to criticize government markets, but I am telling you, one of the best systems of enrolling a vendor, it is there in public sector undertakings. Very strict, very thorough. So I thought I should give you something, a flair of what is institutional and government markets, because they have a different kind of factors which influence them. No role of marketing. Another thing is, in institutional and government markets, hierarchies are very clearly defined. Procedures are very clearly defined. There will be a technical bid, there will be a commercial bid. In case of tender, for example, for what amount of contract will it be a limited tender, and for what over that it will be a public tender, or what are the cases in which no tender is also required. You can straight away give an order. Procedures and processes are very clearly written. And as I said, marketing, selling, this plays very minor role. Your track record is more important. then your relationships. So this is about institutional and government markets. I hope you have understood it well. Now that we have understood as to what are the various factors or what are the various influences on the buying behavior of an organization, we have also understood that what are the orientations of uh, buyer organization. We said there is procurement orientation, there is buying orientation, there is supply chain management orientation. We also understood that what are government and institutional buyers, and what are their specific characteristics. Now, let's come to the end of today's lecture. Let us understand what is the customer's total cost of ownership. It's also called TCO, total cost of ownership. Any organization which buys from you, any factory, any industrial organization, or any organization which buys to further sell, how do they calculate their total cost of ownership? Hurt Michael D in their book B2B Marketing, a South Asian Perspective, and I've purchased the Kindle edition. It costs of three different types of costs, which comprises total cost of ownership, or the total cost in use when calculating the TCO. First is the acquisition cost, ACQUISITION, acquisition cost. This includes the selling price, the price which the customer pays, transportation cost, so selling price plus transportation cost, plus administrative costs of evaluating suppliers, of expediting orders. In case there are any errors, correcting errors in shipment or delivery. Let me explain it like this. I am a buying organization and I buy something from Singapore. Let us say I am buying some machinery from Singapore. So, and it's an expensive machinery. So, what is my acquisition cost? The dollars that I will transfer, to the seller in Singapore, and the freight cost and the custom clearance cost, all cost I will include. Also, the cost I have spent in evaluating the supplier. It's quite likely, if it is a heavy machinery, if it is a very heavy machinery which costs, let's for the sake of simplicity, let's say which costs almost 20 crore rupees. So for that, maybe my engineers, my team went there to evaluate the thing, to study their processes, how robust it is, to see how it works. Okay. And then the cost on shipment. So all of this is acquisition cost. So once again, selling cost, transportation cost, all administrative cost, like evaluating the customer, visits to the customers, shipment cost, delivery cost, custom clearance cost, everything. Second is possession cost. Possession, POSSESSION, possession cost. It includes financing. Did I need to finance that costly equipment? Storage cost, inspection, insurance, taxes, internal handling. So some of it you can take it in acquisition cost, but possession cost, especially storage costs. Possession cost. So third cost is the usage cost, the cost which is associated with the ongoing use of purchased product. So if the machinery has come, it's installation cost. You need to install that machine, it will take installation cost. You need to train your employees on how to use that machine, so employee training cost. When that machine is used, what is the labor cost? It may save labor, but it may also, some labor is required to produce an output from that machine. Repair cost, warranty cost. Suppose you need to replace some parts, product replacement cost, disposal cost. Consumables are there, you may have a machine and you may need to change some parts of the machine periodically. So acquisition cost, let me give another example. I am selling a software solution as a service to an organization. So my upfront cost for that solution, let us say, is $1,000, $1,200 per machines. And this software is installed in, let us say, 20 machines, so $20,000. So what is the service tax, or what is the GST I pay on this? Okay, uh, to check the efficacy of this software, the customer comes to my office. Let us say it is in Bangalore and the customer is in Gurgaon in Delhi. The cost of tendering, cost of evaluating everything, and after that there is a license fee for 1 year. 1 year the upgradation. If there is any upgrades which are required in the software, I do it free. But after that, I will charge them for it. Usage cost. And suppose the software licenses for only 2 years. So third year, if they want to use it, it will be usage cost. They will need to rebuy the license. And after 2 years or after 1 year, suppose I will upgrade. Whenever I will upgrade the software for 1 or 2 years, I will do it free of cost. After that, they will have to use it. So these are the three costs: acquisition cost, possession cost, and usage cost. What should be the strategic response of the buyer, of the seller? So if the buyer is calculating all the cost, we can develop a value based sales offering. Okay, I give you an example from my own experience. We were selling lot of diesel. We were selling lot of diesel to railways. So railways was calculating the acquisition cost, at what price we sold them, transportation cost, storage cost. Because railway had built a storage, so it was a capital item. A storage was built by railways. That storage where diesel used to be kept was managed by the railway staff. So that is also a cost, usage cost. So gradually, when competition started to grow, when Bharat Petroleum also started to give Hindustan, I was in Indian Oil Corporation. So IOC then gave them a value-based offering. IOC said, your current storage which you have already built, the cost is already sunk. I will manage that storage for you. My contractor will manage that storage for you. We will maintain that storage. We will keep it clean. We will keep the pump running and everything. Of course, at a cost, at a price, but it took away so much of headache away from the railways. So similarly, when we were supplying diesel in huge quantity to the power corporation, we offered them to build a tankage for them and to manage and maintain the tankage for them at our cost. Similarly, similar exercise Indian Oil Corporation used to do with many of the army units under Northern Command. Indian Oil Corporation will give tank and pump free of cost. Not that company will do it at a loss, but even when the company, Indian Oil Corporation, when it was calculating its overall revenue to the customer, these costs were subsumed in that pricing. So the way customer calculates his cost, if you as a supplier know that cost, you will be able to make a value based offering to the customer. This is what is called a win-win situation. You are also not making a loss. You are providing tankage, you are providing facility for the customer, and you have included that cost over a long period of time, over the number of transactions that you will make to the customer. Customer also feels very happy that he does not have to invest in underground tank or a dispensing pump, and that the company, internal corporation, the supplier is providing it to him free of cost and maintaining it for him free of cost. This is the win-win situation. This is supply chain management orientation. This is collaborative approach between the seller and the buyer. And this kind of sums up B2B marketing which is successful. Thank you very much.